Hello everyone, in this video we will be seeing part 16 of What If Deku was in the DC universe. So be sure to stick around until the end. Let's get started. Karen was hard at work in the headquarters of the Titans. She had her bumblebee armor on top of her work table as she welded something more into the belt. She lifted her welding mask before she inspected her work. After all the new advances in technology that had been popping up, Karen had decided to get her armor a much-needed tune-up with some new tools that Izuku had helped her to put together. She was happy with the ideas that he had shared with her and was willing to put them to good use. Yes, the new battery has been properly integrated with the suit, Karen said, watching the results of her work. Izuku, could you bring me the shrinking discs? Yes, I got them here, Izuku replied. Izuku had agreed to help Karen with her new upgrades to her armor. He picked up a small stack of 6B-colored throwing discs and took them to Karen's work table. He didn't mind helping her, but he just wished that he could do more than just bring her whatever she needed. But he did like helping with whatever he could. Thanks, Izuku. I know this isn't very fun, but I promise that once we test these out we can go someplace else to celebrate, Karen said as she examined one of the throwing discs. Don't worry, Karen, Izuku replied. I like that this is a quiet night. Little crime, no supervillains running around, and no threats that need to be stopped. It's so quiet that everyone else is taking the evening to do their own thing. I think Diana and Barbie even decided to redecorate the room where Diana is staying. Diana and Barbie redecorating together, Karen wondered. How would that look like? Far from the headquarters of the Titans, Diana and Barbie were discussing the decor of the room. Why are we rearranging these old pieces again? Barbie asked as she and Diana carried an old vase to the corner of the room. Because, Barbie, these pieces are all arranged in the wrong manner. This here is a vase from the wars between Sparta and Athens, while this statue is of the goddess Artemis, sculpted years after the war. Diana lifted the statue with ease before placing it with the other female goddesses of the Greek pantheon. Barbie merely rolled her eyes and huffed in annoyance. She was hoping to get out and drive her car. Fine, but what about this ghastly thing? Barbie asked, pointing to a vestige glaring a disapproving look at her. Why haven't you moved it? It gives me the creeps. I bet this old thing was born with that scowl. Diana gasped. I shall let you know that my mother is capable of many other expressions, Diana said. But the detail is so vivid. It is almost as if she were in the room with us about to give us a lecture. Oh, good Lord. No wonder you ran away from that vicious scowl, Barbie muttered, getting a light shock for her troubles. Damn this accursed thing. At least you can say that your mother gave you the time of day. Diana looked at Barbie and suddenly got an idea. No slouching, young lady, Diana said in a commanding tone. What? I don't slouch, Barbie snapped. And no talking back. No woman will be meek nor whine among the ranks of the Amazons. Understood? Diana said. How was that? I tried to imitate my mother as best as I could. Did I do a good job? Barbie, however, was down on the floor with a shocked look on her face. Back at the headquarters of the Teen Titans, Karen was looking at one of the discs with a large magnifying glass. All right, adding the last component and finished, Karen said as the disc lit up. The first B-disc is ready for testing. That's great, Karen, but what do they DDO? Izuku asked. These discs are meant to be used in two settings, the stun setting and the shrinking setting, Karen explained. Karen walked up to one of the punching bags that they had lying around. She pressed one button on the disc before throwing it at the punching bag. The stun mode is kind of like a stun gun, but the power matches the size of the target. So say someone like Jagana got stung with one of these, she'll be brought down, Karen explained as the punching bag got covered in electricity. That's amazing, Karen, Izuku said. But what does the second setting do? I was hoping you'd ask that, Karen replied, picking up another disc. The shrinking setting allows the object the disc is attached to, well, become smaller. Watch. Karen pressed the shrinking setting before throwing it at one of the overflowing trash cans. The disc stuck to the trash can as the disc glowed yellow. The trash can began to slowly shrink before the eyes of the two heroes. The can had made it to half its normal size before the disc shot out sparks. The trash can then suddenly grew back to its normal size before shrinking once more. The process went back and forth. Karen? Izuku asked. Oh no, the molecular structure is becoming unstable, Karen screamed. The trash can turned yellow before it exploded into a bubble of yellow goo. Oh no, another failure, Karen said as she went to examine the remains. The disc was intact, but the trash can had been turned into molten yellow goo. I don't get it, Karen said, picking up the disc. I thought that it would work. The battery was supposed to help make the process sustain itself, but it somehow made the molecular structure turn like that. Maybe it's not about the power, more about how you use it, Izuku muttered. They work fine when they are meant to stun the opponent, maybe because the discharge has something to go through? Karen overheard Izuku's muttering, sparking an idea. I know, that's a great idea, Izuku, Karen said, catching Izuku by surprise. Did I say something? Izuku asked as Karen began to tweak her disc. Karen began to ramble on about how she hadn't really considered what was once obvious. She went so into her thoughts that her thoughts became mutterings and lengthy ones at that. She sprouted theories and possibilities on how she could use her discs now that she had a better idea of their failings. Izuku felt a drop of sweat run down the side of his head. He wondered if he always looked like that whenever he went on with his mutterings. Only difference that he could see was that Karen was using a lot of scientific terms that he didn't usually use or understand. He made a side note to try to not do it as often, but it was a promise that would take some time to get around to it. Eureka! Karen exclaimed, lifting the disc up. Izuku jumped back in surprise as Karen held up her disc. Now this puppy will work, Karen said. Now what to test it on? She added, looking for something to make small. Karen, shouldn't we test that thing in the open, just in case it blows up again? Izuku asked. I mean, do you really want to explain to Kara and Galatea that you shrunk their favorite punching bag? Or tell Jessica that you liquefied her favorite chair? Or trying to explain to Z that you shrunk her vanity mirror? Karen was brought back down to reality at the mention of the possibility of facing the anger of the team. As a well-versed and practiced scientist, she knew a controlled environment was critical to keep her inventions from causing harm. But the thought of facing her friends in such a manner made her reconsider the standard rules. Yeah, I guess we should try this out on the field, Karen said, scratching her cheek. Just to see how it would fare against the field. Let's get our suits ready, and go to the junkyard to see how they work. The two young heroes suited up and made their way to the junkyard. They walked into the junkyard after passing the gate by the entrance. As they walked through the wrecked cars and pieces of junk, a buzzing sound caught the attention of Deku. The green-clad hero looked up at the sound of buzzing. He spotted a large beehive sticking out from under the hood of one of the wrecked cars. It seems we have a beehive here, Deku pointed out. Yeah, weird that they made a hive here, Bumblebee replied. I suppose that they've found a new place to make one, but we're not here to see the bees. We're here to test my new discs. Right, Deku replied. By the way, Bumblebee, how did you come up with these bee discs? Well, I figured that we would need something to balance out villains and threats that have growth powers like Giganta, Bumblebee explained. That way we can make them into less of a threat. Deku couldn't help but feel like this was just another jab at people being taller than her. He understood her desire to prove that she was as tough as the other girls despite her size, but he just wished that these discs didn't turn out to be a disaster waiting to happen. All right, that old car should do nicely, Bumblebee said, pulling out her disc. Get ready to see this make it tiny. That was lame, wasn't it? Only a little bit. Deku sighed. Bumblebee threw the disc at the old used-up car. The disc stuck to the side of the rusted door before it glowed yellow. Bumblebee stood ready and anxious for what would happen. But all she got was a couple of sparks coming out from the disc. Oh, come on, Bumblebee groaned. I guess the discs still have a few more bugs to work out, Deku commented. But at least no one got hurt. Yeah, I guess that's a plus, Bumblebee muttered as she walked to the car that was meant to be the size of a Hot Wheel toy. I don't get it. When I want to be big, I become small. But when I want to be small, I can't change the size of anything else. Deku placed his hand on her shoulder. I'm sure you'll figure it out, Bumblebee, Deku said reassuringly. Thanks, Izuku, Bumblebee replied. Bumblebee grabbed the disc from the car and pulled it free. But the disc wouldn't come off from the car. She tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. She grunted and snarled at the disc being stuck. Come on, you useless hunk of junk, Bumblebee groaned as she put her foot against the door. Could you help me, Deku? It's stuck. Yeah, where do you want me to pull? Deku asked. Just wrap your hands around my waist and pull, Bumblebee instructed, keeping her blush hidden with her helmet. Deku nodded, thanking that his mask kept his blush hidden. He wrapped his arms around her waist and helped her pull against the disc's hold. Pull harder, Bumblebee said, pulling at the disc. Harder, harder. They pulled as hard as they could, not knowing that the light on the disc turned on once more. One more time. I can feel it loosening up. Bumblebee cried out. The two heroes gave the disc one final strong pull. They fell backwards with the disc in their hands. Bumblebee fell on top of Deku with a sigh. Finally, we got it, Bumblebee said before she noticed that the disc was lit up. Oh, ooh. The disc activated and engulfed both Bumblebee and Deku in its bright light. Both heroes closed their eyes as the light shined brightly in their eyes. However, as soon as the light came, it faded. Deku slowly opened his eyes. All he saw was the bright blue sky. What happened? Deku asked before hearing a groan coming from on top of him. He looked down and spotted Bumblebee, but she was different. Bumblebee, are you alright? Deku asked. Yeah, I'm good. Stupid disc didn't do what I hoped it would. Bumblebee groaned. I wouldn't say that, Deku muttered as Bumblebee got up to her feet. Bumblebee didn't understand what Deku meant. She looked at him with curiosity before she finally noticed the difference. She was way taller than him, head at the very least. Oh my gosh, I'm taller now, Bumblebee hopped in excitement. Although Deku was happy for Bumblebee, he then noticed that she wasn't the only one that was taller. Bumblebee, look behind you, Deku said, pointing behind her. Bumblebee stopped her happy jumping. She turned around and saw that the car they had tried to test the disc on was now the size of a building. Oh, I think the disc did work after all, Bumblebee said. A little too much. Yeah, I think so, Deku added. But how are we going to get back to our normal sizes? I don't know, maybe if I can recalibrate one of the other discs, I can undo what happened to us, Bumblebee said. Do you have any other discs on you? Deku asked. I think I left them back at the base. We need to get there or we'll stay this tall forever, Bumblebee explained as she activated her wings. Then let's get going, Deku replied. Just as they were about to move out, they heard a buzzing noise coming from over their heads. What was that? Deku asked. It wasn't my wings, Bumblebee said as they looked around for the source of the noise. They heard the buzzing sound again. This time it moved quickly over their heads. The noise began to encircle them. The heroes got back to back as they scoured for the source of the noise. As they watched out for any source of that noise, it became louder and louder. "Where is it coming from?" Bumblebee asked. "It kinda sounds like it's coming from," Deku replied, listening for the source of the noise until he found it. "Up there." Deku and Bumblebee looked up and spotted a swarm of bees flying above their heads. "Oh no," Deku said. "That's a lot of bees," Bumblebee added. "But why are they here?" The bees moved, closing in on the two shrunken heroes like a school of sharks. They moved around, focusing their eyes on Bumblebee more than Deku. "Not sure. I think they think you're a bee as well," Deku surmised. "But why are they behaving like this? You wouldn't happen to have a bee translator on your helmet, would you?" "Just because I like the bee theme doesn't mean that I can talk to bees," Bumblebee replied. "Although I'm beginning to think that I should have gotten one of those." The bees charged at the heroes. Deku activated One for All and kicked one of the incoming bees away from them. "I guess they think we're food or something," Deku said. "Don't hurt them. Bees are needed on the planet," Bumblebee said, dodging the charging bees. "But I don't want to be food for them. Let's go," she added, flying away. Bumblebee picked up Deku and flew away from the bees. The two heroes exited the junkyard with a small swarm of bees coming up behind them. They flew through the streets, dodging pedestrians and cars. "Why are they chasing us?" Bumblebee asked as Deku ran on the roof of a car. "I don't know. We didn't attack their hive, didn't even go near it," Deku replied before kicking another bee away from them. "Let's just make it to sweet justice before we become food for them," Bumblebee said before abruptly stopping. A large truck drove past them, nearly crushing them against its windshield. Bumblebee took off once more, but this time through the streets and back alleys of the city. She flew under fire escapes and people that were throwing away their garbage as the bees chased after her. The two small heroes were now made aware that the whole world was dangerous. They kept going on the run from the bees as well as the rest of the world. "We can't keep this up," Deku said, spotting an open manhole that was just about to be closed. "In there." Bumblebee nodded before zooming past the cars. She narrowly flew past the moving vehicles. She dodged a large pickup truck by flying under it. She let out a sigh of relief before she was met with another fast-moving car headed straight towards her. Bumblebee flew under the car, holding Deku as tightly as she could. She spotted the manhole and dove into it before it got closed by the workers. "That was too close," Bumblebee sighed. "Yeah," Deku sighed in agreement. They then started coughing as the smell of the sewers got to their noses. "Okay, maybe diving into the sewers wasn't the best idea," Deku admitted. "At least we aren't being chased by those bees anymore." Bumblebee coughed. "This could be a good way for us to get to the base without running into any more problems. Let's land and figure out where to go from here," Deku said, pointing to a dried spot to land. "Over there." Bumblebee flew them down to the dried-out spot before panting in exhaustion. "Are you all right, Bumblebee?" Deku asked, letting her lean on him. "I'm good, just a little out of breath," Bumblebee breathed out. "I need a minute before moving." Deku kept a lookout as Bumblebee took in a couple of deep breaths. However, Bumblebee wasn't able to get as much of a breath given their current hiding spot. "Oh man, this is just my luck. I finally get taller but everything else around me gets much bigger," Bumblebee moaned. "And to top it off, we're stuck in the sewers of the city. Not the best day I've had." "Don't worry, Bumblebee. We'll figure this out," Deku said, helping Bumblebee get up. "I think we're right on South BLVD, which would mean that we need to head north to the intersection and then turn east on 52 Stones." Bumblebee smiled as Deku lifted her up on his back and started running with One for All. She loved how he was always there for her regardless of the size they were. She often saw him like an older brother or mentor that helped her through her problems and guided her to becoming a better person. She wished she could just lay against his back and just enjoy the feeling. But Bumblebee remembered where they were and covered her nose. After running at high speeds for over an hour, Deku and Bumblebee finally arrived at the intersection of the sewers. Just then a loud creaking noise caught their attention. "What was that?" Bumblebee asked. "I don't know, but it sounded like it came from the other side of this hallway," Deku said, turning towards the sound of the noise. They narrowed their eyes to see what was causing all the noise, and Bumblebee even activated her lights. The creaking and groaning got louder as it got closer to the two shrunken heroes. "What could it be?" Deku asked. "It sounds like it's coming from the pipes," Bumblebee pointed out. The sound got louder and louder, but something else was added to the incoming noise. Now it sounded more like a bolt from the pipes was sent flying from the rest of the pipe. Suddenly, a huge torrent of dirty and murky water blasted from the pipes and enveloped the hallway. Both heroes screamed in fear as they took off, running away from the flood coming towards them. They ran as fast as they could with the water gaining ground and getting slowly closer towards the two shrunken heroes. The amount of water would have been nothing to them in their regular height, but being the size of a bumblebee made the water all the more terrifying. "What is going on?" Bumblebee asked as she used her wings to carry her and Deku away from the incoming sewer tsunami. "The pipes must have bursted and the water is flooding this part of the sewers," Deku replied as he jumped to the pipes that were at the very top of the sewer. "We need to get back up before we're washed away by the flood. This is definitely not the way I want to go. There's an exit just up ahead," Bumblebee said. "Hold on, I'll catch you." Deku jumped towards Bumblebee, catching her hands. Bumblebee pulled Deku close to her as she flew ahead of the incoming water. She looked up and spotted a rain drain entrance a little farther ahead. She flew directly at the entrance with Deku close to her body, managing to get out of the sewers and back to the open air. Bumblebee didn't stop there. She continued flying towards an empty table. She landed on the table just enough to figure out where they were and how far they would need to fly back to their base. Okay, so no more sewers for a while, right? Bumblebee asked. Yep, definitely. I can see the Ferris wheel over the horizon, Deku said, pointing to the pier. We should get there shortly. I hope so. This is worse than being my normal size. Bumblebee sighed. Everything is either trying to kill me or squash me. I should have stayed in the base and done some more tests. Hey, don't beat yourself up, Bumblebee. I'm to blame for this. If I hadn't suggested going outside, then this wouldn't have happened, Deku replied apologetically. Bumblebee smiled as she gave Deku a kiss on the cheek. Thanks, Deku, but I need to make myself responsible for my decisions. I'll fix this and we'll be back to our regular sizes in no time, Bumblebee claimed, putting on a brave face. Deku smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Ha, a pair of bee-bugs. Deku and Bumblebee looked up and saw a woman screaming in fear of them. Kill them, she screamed, lifting up her bag before bringing it down on the table. Deku and Bumblebee jumped out of the way as the bag struck the table. The table was flipped and both of the shrunken heroes were sent flying into the air. Deku and Bumblebee flew through the air and landed on another table, this time one with a couple that were just about to share dessert. They landed on the chocolate mousse, causing the couple to scream in surprise. The two shrunken heroes jumped out of the dessert and ran as fast as they could. They ducked and jumped over the swatting napkins and the cans of bug spray. Bumblebee picked up Deku and flew up towards the roof of the restaurant. They landed before looking down at the restaurant and the people, seeing the results of the chaos. Wow, some people just don't like bugs, Bumblebee muttered. But at least we are away from them for now, Deku added. Just then the sound of chirping caught their attention. The two shrunk heroes turned around and spotted a whole flock of pigeons looking at them. Oh, come on, Deku muttered before the pigeons flew towards them. Deku and Bumblebee let out a scared scream before taking off once more. They flew through the sky as the pigeons flew after them. Deku looked back and spotted one of the pigeons getting closer to them. He quickly turned around and fired a flick at the flying feathered menace. 20% Delaware smash, Deku called out, unleashing his attack. The blast of air struck the pigeon like a bowling ball, sending it back and away from the two heroes. However, this only allowed for more pigeons to take its place. The flying threats flapped ever closer to the two heroes, forcing them to work together for a counter-strategy. They're still coming, Deku called out as he fired another Delaware smash at another bird. Why are they after us? I don't know, but we need to lose them, Bumblebee replied as she carried Deku. And fast. Bumblebee held on to Deku for dear life as she flew them away from the incoming pigeons. She kept them in the air while Deku fired his smashes at the pigeons with near-perfect accuracy. However, she was forced to move from side to side and do some abrupt turns to avoid the obstacles that popped in front of them. I'll never whine about being short again, Bumblebee cried out, flying past a stop sign. We're almost there, Bumblebee, Deku called out encouragingly. I can hear the waves of the ocean getting closer. Head to the food area of the pier, we'll lose them there, he instructed before firing another Delaware smash with his pinky finger. Hurry, Bumblebee did as Deku suggested. She spotted the snack bar with just enough people with popcorn, hot dogs, cotton candy, and pizza to get the attention of the pigeons. She flew across the pier and the people, putting the food in front of the flying pursuers. As soon as the food came in front of the pigeons, the chase was over. The birds jumped at the chance of getting a piece of the pier food, leaving the heroes to go on their merry way back to their headquarters. Deku and Bumblebee arrived at the entrance of Sweet Justice, getting in just as another client stepped inside. They zoomed past all the patrons of the sweet establishment before noticing that their usual table and entrance to their secret base was occupied. A couple was eating a banana split while Deku and Bumblebee watched them from above. What do we do now? Bumblebee asked. Those two are blocking the entrance. We need to get them out without arousing suspicion. Bumblebee, try using your stingers at their lowest. It may make them think they're cramps, Deku suggested. And they'll get up and stretch and give us our way in, Bumblebee said. Bumblebee quietly floated down to the table, dropping Deku behind the napkin dispenser. She turned her stingers on and set them to the smallest output. She fired one shot at the leg of the lady, causing her to yelp in slight pain. Bumblebee then turned her sights on the other lady, just as she was about to take a bite out of the banana split. The couple got up and stretched their legs, hoping to get rid of the feeling that they had just been stung. Deku and Bumblebee used this chance to go down to the secret base, leaving everyone none the wiser. The two shrunken heroes arrived at the base and quickly set out to work. Let's grab the discs, Deku said, jumping to the table using one for all. Bumblebee tried to move one of the discs, but they were too heavy for her. Deku, I need you to be my hands. I'll tell you what to do, Bumblebee said. Deku picked up the disc using his greater strength. He rolled it up to Bumblebee and opened it up for her. Bumblebee got to work on the discs. She needed to reverse the energy that was used for shrinking into one that would make them bigger. She altered her stingers into makeshift torches and began her rewiring. All right, I think I've got it, Bumblebee said. Should we test it? Deku asked, holding onto the disc. Good idea. Put it on top of that book, Bumblebee instructed. Deku carried the disc all the way to the nearby book and placed it on top of it. He jumped back. Bumblebee activated the disc and they both waited for the disc to do its thing. The disc glowed yellow for a second. Then the book began to glow yellow as it started growing. It's working, Bumblebee squealed. Deku smiled, but then noticed that the book's growth wasn't slowing down. Bumblebee, it's not stopping, Deku pointed out. Oh no, the energy is not stopping, Bumblebee said as the book kept on growing, passing the size of a Vespa. We need to stop it before it crushes the base and us with it. Deku and Bumblebee jumped at the book as it crushed the table underneath it. They grabbed hold of the disc. Bumblebee tried to deactivate it, but it wasn't working. Can we stop it if we disconnect it? Deku asked. Yeah, that should work. If they aren't connected to a surface, the shrinking and growing will stop, Bumblebee replied. They both grabbed hold of the disc and pulled at it with all their strength. As the two heroes pulled at the disc, the growing energy affected them as well. They slowly reached their normal size just as they were reaching the top of the ceiling. One final push, both Deku and Bumblebee called out, pulling the disc off of the book. They looked up to see the ceiling only inches from crushing them. That was a close one, Bumblebee muttered. Yeah, but it was fun, Deku replied. Maybe next time I can help out fixing the bugs in a more controllable place. Thanks, Izuku. I'd appreciate that, Bumblebee said, looking at herself. But now we have two problems. 1. What are we going to do with this book? And 2? Deku asked before the book shrunk back down to its normal size, dropping the two heroes. Well, that's the first problem solved, Bumblebee said as they got back to their feet. What was the second problem, Karen? Deku asked. Karen took off her helmet and looked herself at the mirror. How am I going to explain to my parents that I grew a whole foot in height? Karen said, making Deku spot what she was talking about. Karen had retained her slightly taller stature thanks to the effects of her discs. Yeah, but you still look nice, Izuku said, getting Karen a blush. Barbara Gordon was many things to people that knew her. She was a superhero, a well-versed sleuth, a burrito enthusiast, a big Batman fan, a tech whiz, an acrobat, and a crazy, happy-go-lucky girl. But above all those things, Barbara Gordon was a geek. And much to her delight, she was playing her new favorite game, Mind Heroes II. She played on her portable gaming device as her own hero. In the game, an armored bat-themed heroine battled against tiny monsters. Barbara activated the game's settings and designed a new weapon. She combined the throwing stars with a blaster, creating an energy disc blaster. She smashed the buttons on her controller, causing the in-game character to fire her weapon at the monsters. Just then, the level's boss monster appeared. Barbara commanded her character to jump back and fire once more. Come on, Barbara muttered as she hit the buttons. Inside the game, Barbara's character, Bat Queen, ducked under the attack of the boss. She jumped up and kicked the monster in the face before firing at it with her bat-shaped energy discs. The monster let out a painful roar as Bat Queen rushed at the boss before giving it a powerful uppercut punch. The boss disappeared in a big explosion. Yes, Barbara cheered, jumping on top of her desk to celebrate. Who the big girl? Who the big girl? Oh yeah. Barbara danced on top of her desk like someone who had just won the lottery twice in the same day. Barbara, you should get down from there, Izuku whispered, trying to get the redhead's attention. No way, Izuku, I feel like the queen of the world, Barbara replied loudly. I just beat the advanced level 10 in hard mode. Nothing could bring me down. Good to share with the class, Miss Gordon, a stern voice said. Barbara returned from the winning cloud she was on and saw Mrs. Smith and the rest of the class looking at her. I suppose that you've finished today's quiz and thus had enough time to play your little game? Mrs. Smith asked with a raised eyebrow. Barbara looked down at the quiz she needed to do. Not only was her quiz blank, it had a couple shoe prints on it. I'm almost done, Mrs. S., Barbara said, getting back to her seat with a sheepish smile on her face. Mrs. Smith looked at the blank page with a disapproving scowl. Just then the bell rang, causing the rest of the students to let out a sigh of relief. Then I hope you got a high score in your little game, Miss Gordon, because you will retake the quiz on Friday detention, Mrs. Smith said, taking away the quizzes. Barbara slumped down on her desk, groaning at her bad luck. Another thing that Barbara Gordon was a little scattered-brained. After classes, the heroes gathered up at the school entrance with Barbara sticking her face to the screen of her game. Barbara, you gotta get your eyes out of that game, Izuku said. I can leave it any time I want. Besides, I don't see a problem with it, Barbara replied. However, just as she said that, someone opened up their locker. Izuku stopped Barbara from walking into it. He shot her a worried look. Calm down, besides it's not a big deal, Barbara said. Name one time that me playing a video game has been a problem. You forgot that there was a quiz today and got detention on Friday. You nearly walked into a locker. Izuku counted off. You were late to patrol yesterday, and you texted Barbie all the things that you learned from spying on us. Oh yeah, my bad, but I was in the zone, Barbara replied. She hasn't stopped texting me about that, Izuku added with slight annoyance. Good thing Diana has her covered. Hey, let me go. Izuku and Barbara looked up at the sight before them. A short black-haired kid with a pair of glasses was being picked on by a pair of Cobblepot's thugs. He had a black t-shirt with a light bulb on it with a pair of white pants. You know how it is, Light. You cross the penguin, you pay the iceberg, one of the thugs said. I don't owe him anything, the kid replied. That ain't what he said, the other thug snapped. You had to pass the merchandise before the big game. Hey, why don't you pick on someone your own size? Izuku asked challengingly. The two thugs spotted Izuku coming towards them, and the teacher behind him. Sorry about that, just a misunderstanding, the first thug said before they walked away. This ain't over. You'll hear about the boss later tomorrow. The short kid was dropped back to the floor. He snarled at them as they went by. Don't be late. The second grunt added. You need a hand? Izuku asked, holding out his hand. Thanks, the short kid replied, taking Izuku's hand. You're welcome. I know what it's like to be bullied. Izuku said as the kid got back to his feet. You're Arthur Light, right? Yeah, although everyone seems to want to walk all over me since I don't stand out. Arthur replied. You should tell the teachers about those guys, Izuku suggested. Don't worry, I've got a way to deal with things. Arthur replied. Thanks anyway, he added before walking away from the lockers. Izuku couldn't help but feel like there was something else going on. Barbara, what do you think that whole thing was about? Izuku asked, but he didn't get a response. Babs? Izuku asked, looking back only to let out a sigh. Barbara was once again playing her video game. What was that? Barbara asked, looking up from the screen. Izuku sighed. He didn't exactly know what to do with Barbara, but all he could do was get her attention on something else. He grabbed Barbara by the shoulder and guided her out of the school. Some time passed and the two young heroes were at the school library. Izuku had suggested that Barbara studied for the makeup quiz. He offered to help her study, and it was also a way to get the game away from her for a minute. Alright Barbara, the exam focused on what we read from chapters 6 and 7. You've already read the book in its entirety, so this should be easy. Izuku said. Why do I have to study? I've read The Great Gatsby at least twice and I've watched the movie. Barbara whined, keeping her eyes on the game. Because you've been glued to the screen of that video game for the last 2 weeks, Izuku replied. What's it about if you're so into it? Mind Heroes 2 is an RPG game where you not only create your own hero character, but you also build your own weapons and armor from your defeated opponents. But you need to use different item combinations to win. Barbara replied. I'm the best because I make the best weapons. Izuku blinked in confusion. He had played his fair share of video games in his life, but never to this degree. But you're a superhero in the real world. Why are you playing a video game where you pretend to be one? Izuku asked. It's a way to blow off steam. The usual way we used to blow off steam is still a no-no, Barbara replied with a saucy undertone. Izuku blushed at the mention of what Barbara meant. Barbara's game suddenly gave out a beep. She looked down and spotted an online challenge being issued. She read the gamer's screen name and scoffed. Dr. Light, what a funny name, Barbara said, getting a raised eyebrow from Izuku. Relax, Izuku. A quick round and then we can study, she added, accepting the challenge. The battle began when both players' avatars appeared on the screen. Barbara's opponent was a tall, muscular warrior wearing a black doctor's coat with a light bulb for a head. The weapon-making wheel appeared over their characters as they each built their own weapons. Dr. Light created a pair of fighting gloves which appeared on his hands. Battle gloves? Amateur, Barbara scoffed. Let me show you how it's done, she added as she built a plasma rifle for her character. The battle began as Barbara's character fired her rifle at Dr. Light. Dr. Light didn't dodge out of the way. He crossed his arms, blocking the shots. However, the character wasn't taking any damage. The gloves were absorbing the energy that Barbara's hero was firing. What? Barbara snapped as her opponent went on the offensive. Dr. Light channeled the energy through his gloves and fired it at Barbara's weapon, making it disappear. He then proceeded to attack her with a barrage of punches, forcing Barbara to panic. No, 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 Barbara repeated, ignoring the shushing from the librarian. This can't be happening. Back at the game, Barbara's character tried to run away and dodge the attacks, but it was to no avail. Dr. Light landed a devastating combo attack, blasting Barbara's character into pixels. Barbara's eyes were wide in disbelief. Sorry, Barbara, it looks like you lost, Izuku said apologetically. Barbara dropped her game and her face on the table. How did this happen? She cried out, muffled by the table. Izuku patted her on the back, consoling her for her loss. He was well aware of the sting of losing at a video game you believed you had mastered. Night had fallen and it was Deku and Batgirl's turn to patrol the streets. Alright Batgirl, according to Bumblebee's information there is a truck full of diamonds that will pass through this street which would make it into, Deku explained when he heard a video game blaster going off. Deku looked down to see Batgirl playing her game once more. Batgirl, Deku said firmly. Just a second, Deku, Batgirl said. I think I know how that guy beat me. Now all I've got to do is build something better to counter it. Deku took the game away, feeling the need that he needed to be the parent in the room. Hey, Batgirl snapped. You can play after we are done with our patrol, Deku said as Batgirl tried to snatch her game back. And you study for the test. Fine. Batgirl pouted as Deku placed the game into his backpack. Deku and Batgirl spotted the armored truck moving out from the warehouse and into the street. They ran up on top of the buildings, keeping an eye on the truck as they did so. The cool air of the night was a welcoming feeling for the two heroes. The lights of the city were the only lights that they had for guidance. The truck approached an intersection as the heroes jumped down to the roof of a smaller building. Just then, all the lights around the intersection began to flicker. The guards driving the car looked at the lights in confusion, wondering if there was a power outage or someone was messing with the lights. Then the lights went out completely, leaving the whole block in darkness. Looks like we've got company, Deku said, keeping his eyes open for any signs of the villains. Good thing I've brought my BB at night vision goggles, Batgirl said, pulling out her goggles. However, before Batgirl put on the goggles, a single light shined brightly in front of the heroes in the armored truck. When the light subsided, a figure stood in front of the truck. A man wearing a black skin-tight suit with a pair of white boots, a white belt with yellow spots, an armored vest that looked like a light bulb on his chest, and a pair of white elbow-length gloves with light bulbs on the back of the hands. He also wore a black mask with a white headband, a white spike, and a white one-eyed visor. "Who is this guy?" Deku asked. "He looks familiar," Batgirl replied. Back on the street, the mysterious man stepped towards the truck. The two security guards stepped out and pulled out their guns. "Freeze, creep," the guards demanded. "Don't worry, gentlemen, I'm only here to enlighten you," the strange man said as his gloves lit up. The strange light bulb man aimed his hands at the guards before he fired upon them. Rays of light came out from his gloves, shooting the guns away from the guards and taking out the tires. He then slammed his hands together, creating a web of some kind. He flung the webs at the guards, sticking them into the ground. "Not bad for a start, but I was hoping for more of a challenge," the strange villain taunted. "Then you'll love us," Batgirl called out, flinging a batarang at the villain. The villain shot the flying shuriken, turning it to dust. Deku used this chance to charge at the villain with an axe kick to the head. "Manchester smash," Deku called out as he swung down his leg at the head of the villain. The villain raised both of his arms to block the attack with a light shield. Deku's attack shattered the shield and sent the villain back. "I see that my challenge has been met. Come forth, Titans, and meet your greatest nemesis," the villain called out. "Who are you anyway?" Batgirl asked. "You may call me Dr. Light." Dr. Light introduced himself with a mocking bow. Batgirl gasped as she recognized that name. "Master of Light's power and energy, now bow before my brightness and despair," Dr. Light said as lights came out from his suit. "I'm sorry to say that," Deku began, only for Batgirl to jump ahead. "Your light show is about to be shut down, Mr. Light," Batgirl snapped before throwing a batarang at the strange man. Dr. Light fired another blast of light, destroying the projectile. He jumped back and dodged the attacks of the Titan. Batgirl attacked Dr. Light with a punch and then followed it with a roundhouse kick to the chest. Dr. Light kept creating light shields and weapons to move around the attacks that Batgirl sent his way. He then brought his hands together in a loud clap, creating a blinding light in front of Batgirl. "Ha!" Batgirl screamed. "Not too bright, are you, Doctor?" Light taunted, creating a light whip and wrapping Batgirl with it. "I was expecting more of a challenge from the protectors of the city, then you'll have more than that from me," Deku cried out, jumping in with a punch at the villain. Dr. Light jumped back, narrowly missing the punch of the Green Titan. Deku called upon the power of One for All as the green lightning crackled around his body. He jumped forward and threw another punch at the villain, breaking through one of the light shields. He threw another punch and sent Dr. Light to the top of the armored truck. Dr. Light quickly got back up just as Deku jumped high in the air, reeling up another attack. The light villain raised both of his hands up in defense of the attack. He created a light bubble that was meant to protect him. Deku switched up his punch for a kick at the side of the shield. He raised his leg up high and brought down the axe kick on the light bubble, shattering it. Dr. Light was sent behind the armored truck as the back door was busted open by the kick. Deku walked up to the back of the truck and spotted Dr. Light scrambling up to his feet. He spotted that the villain's equipment was busted and was on the verge of being torn apart. "The fight is over, Dr. Light. Surrender now," Deku said, putting on his best all-might voice. Dr. Light looked down at the busted door and saw that it was open enough to get what he wanted. "You are truly better than what I thought. Guess I'll have to level up before taking you on, Doctor," Light said, grabbing one of the yellow orbs from his belt. Deku was about to retort, but Dr. Light flung the yellow orb at the truck. A flashbang went off, blinding Deku. He blocked his eyes using his arm. Once the light faded away, Deku looked at where Dr. Light had been sitting, only to find that he was gone. He looked around for any signs of the villain, but he didn't find anything around of the villain. He then heard a groan and a muffled struggle. Deku looked back to see Batgirl flailing around like a fish out of water. "Hold on, Batgirl," Deku said, rushing to her side. Deku quickly unwrapped Batgirl, pulling off the light whip from her body. "Thanks, Deku, but what happened to that walking light bulb?" Batgirl asked. "He managed to get away," Deku replied. "Drat, I will get you next time, Dr. Light," Batgirl said. "He hasn't beaten me yet." Deku looked at his friend and companion with confusion. "What are you talking about?" Deku asked. "My little dumb game has just become real," Batgirl stated. The next day, Deku and Batgirl were looking over the footage of the other night as they read the report made by the police. According to what they read, the villain had only gotten his hands on 3 diamonds. Each of the diamonds weren't very big and not very valuable. But that only raised more questions of why go through all the trouble of grabbing it in the first place. However, the thing that kept Batgirl's mind the most was the fact that the player that defeated her was real. She was glued to her screen, going through combinations of different weapons to take down the opponent that she couldn't beat. She muttered how the gloves worked in the game and how she could counter them. "So if I could get my hands on a concussion cannon, I'll be able to take him down," Batgirl said. "Batgirl, are you sure that Dr. Light is the same guy that defeated you in the game?" Deku asked. "Positive. It was the same design and the same functions as the gloves that he used to defeat me. But with this combination, I'll be sure to beat him," Batgirl said, pulling up the game screen. Deku observed the screen and the weapon that Batgirl had made up. However, there were a couple of problems with the conception of the weapon. Where are you going to get dragon scales to power up the cannon? Deku asked. Batgirl's grin dropped. Dang it, Batgirl snapped. I don't get it. How can I beat this guy? Deku picked up the game screen and looked at the recorded defeat of Batgirl's match. Well, you can start by not playing his game, Deku replied, getting Batgirl's attention. Look at how he fights in the recordings. He has this game down to a science. You try to play his game, he'll defeat you each time. He is better at his game. What we can do is make the most out of our game. Pull him out of what he thinks is his comfort zone and surprise him. Batgirl thought about what Deku had said. She had to admit that there was a lot of solid logic to what he was saying. Now start thinking outside the box. That's what you're best at, Babs, Deku said, handing the game back to Batgirl. Batgirl smiled at the words of her boyfriend. She often forgot that he was also the brains of the team along with her and Karen. She wasn't blind to how people looked at the team, with Wonder Woman being the leader, Supergirl and Power Girl being the strongest members, Zatanna being the magic specialist, Green Lantern being the conscience of the team, her being the detective, and Bumblebee being the science expert. And Batgirl also knew that Deku was the heart of the team, lending his knowledge and power to any who would need it. He often humbled her and helped her rethink her more harebrained ideas. As Batgirl thought these things, she looked back at her game and noticed the icon that their newest nemesis was using. She pulled up the computer and began searching and cross-referencing the information that she found. Batgirl, what's wrong? Deku asked. I just thought of something, Batgirl said. Look at the recording from last night and tell me what you see. Deku did as she said, and had to admit that the fight was very one-sided, with the new villain being very reactive to them. It looks like he is still fairly new to the game, Deku muttered. Exactly. The gaming lingo that Dr. lightest his knowledge of weapons, showing that he got everything from the video game and is still testing things out, Batgirl explained. Also, his equipment looks like it was put together with whatever stuff he could find. That leads me to believe that our doctor is actually between the ages of 15 to 25 and is working on a budget. Deku smiled. This was one of Batgirl's crazy moments in which she solved everything in a matter of seconds. By taking this into account, I think I can put together a rough idea of who our newest villain might be, Batgirl added, typing away at the computer as a face started to take shape. But that still doesn't tell us what he plans to do with the diamonds that he stole or why, Deku said. Diamonds are very good reflective surfaces, so if his whole thing is light, then they could be used to power something he has saved for later, Batgirl surmised. A power amplifier? Maybe he plans on upgrading his gloves for a new version to gain the upper hand, Deku guessed. Maybe, but why would he need so much power? Batgirl asked, just as the computer gave her a match on the face of their new enemy. Both heroes saw the assumed face of the new supervillain. Their eyes widened as the look resembled someone that they weren't expecting. Batgirl, are you sure of this? Deku asked. I'm afraid this might be true, but at least we know where he'll be, Batgirl said. Let's go. Metropolis High School was usually seen as a place where students could go on to do great things. It was seen as one of the best schools in the city. However, the school had a dark side. Things tended to get lost, manipulated elections, and test answers being given up for the right price. Star students were caught doing things that they didn't want to, and others were forced to set up other students for this well-oiled machine to continue. This dark side was all the work of one man, senior year student, and most likely to become a crime boss, Oswald Cobblepot. Cobblepot was a guy that could get things for the right price. He was a heavy-set kid with a pointy nose and a stuck-up attitude. He wore a black shirt on top of a white jacket, black pants, fancy white shoes, and a top hat that made him look like the boss of a gang. He walked with a sneaky smile with a row of teeth that said, "I'm cooking up something illegal." He stood with two of his grunts by his side at the back of the school. He had made a substantial gang of thugs that did what he told them, and was about to step up his usual game. A large truck pulled up in front of them, and Cobblepot smiled as the truck opened up. About time. Unload it all, boys, Cobblepot ordered with a snap of his fingers. Several of his students began to get all the things off the truck. They carried boxes full of unknown merchandise. One of the boxes was set in front of Cobblepot. He snapped his fingers once more. One of his thugs opened up the box. Inside the box were calculators, pencils, pens, books, and other pieces of counterfeited school equipment, including food vouchers. Payday, boys, Cobblepot laughed. So far everything I've gotten has been pocket change. With this, the whole school will pay you a P. Boss, what are we doing with this stuff anyway? One of the thugs asked. Cobblepot groaned in annoyance. We will switch this stuff from what the school has. The students will grow desperate and will seek better things, and I'll make them pay through the nose for what they would have gotten for free, Cobblepot explained. As soon as Cobblepot finished explaining his newest scheme, a blast of light blew up the box full of stuff. The energy beam scorched the faulty equipment as panic spread through the kids. Oswald Cobblepot and his goons were sent back as more beams of light fired up at the place. People scurried for cover as the attacker stepped into sight. It was none other than Dr. Light. Hey, you maniac, what's the big idea? Cobblepot demanded. Do you have any idea how much this stuff cost me? Don't worry, Cobblepot. By the time I'm done with you, the receipt will be the least of your worries. Dr. Light snapped. Dr. Light fired at Cobblepot with murder in his eyes. Not far from the school, Deku and Batgirl spotted the bright lights that Dr. Light was using. I sometimes hate being right, Batgirl muttered, which is rare. Let's go, people could get hurt, Deku added, using Ofa to increase his power. Deku picked up Batgirl. He carried her bridal style as they made their way to the school. Back in the school, almost all of Oswald Cobblepot's goons had fled from the scene, leaving their boss at the mercy of the light-themed villain. He was crawling in fear away from Dr. Light as he calmly walked after the heavyset senior. Dr. Light's gloves shined bright as he got closer to the exit. "Oh, we're not done, Penguin. We're just getting started," Dr. Light said, firing another beam of light in front of the wannabe criminal. "I just realized how much you actually look like one of those feathered pincushions." "What did you call me?" Cobblepot snapped. "I'm Oswald Cobblepot and I run this school, and one day I'll run Gotham." Dr. Light didn't reply. He just lifted his hand and a beam of light fired out from it. Oswald's hat fell down from his head with a burning hole going through it. Wait. We may have started on with the wrong foot here. I'm a businessman and I'd like to make a deal with you. See, I need muscle like you to deal with the bigger issues that may come up. I'd like to offer you a job. How about I cut you in at 15% of all my transactions and a bonus at the end of each month? Every time that I sell some of my illegal stuff or extort people with the blackmail material I've got, I'll give you a cut. The whole school is in my pocket and I can get them to do whatever I want." Cobblepot smiled, feeling like he had the man in the bag. "So what do you think?" Cobblepot asked. "You really think you can buy or manipulate your way out of this one, Doctor?" Light growled. "How many kids have you extorted to get where you are? How many lives have you ruined? This is for everyone that you've stepped on," he snapped. Dr. Light aimed his hands at the heavy-set boy and prepared to fire. However, the attack didn't hit its target. A batarang struck Dr. Light's chest plate, sending him back. The blast misfired, giving the high school senior the chance he needed to run away. Oswald only got a few steps away before tripping over his feet. He scurried over behind one of the remaining crate boxes. "We won't let you kill him, Dr. Light," Deku called out as he landed with Batgirl in tow. Deku and Batgirl got into their battling positions, staring at the villain. "Why did you stop me?" Dr. Light snapped. "I'm putting an end to that leech once and for all. Do you even know how many people were hurt because of him? I'm giving him what he deserves." He roared as he fired a blast of light at the two heroes. Deku and Batgirl jumped to opposite sides, avoiding the blast. Deku used one for all to run around Dr. Light, drawing his fire with his greater speed. Dr. Light fired blast after blast of light at the blurry green-clad hero, but none of his blasts struck Deku. Batgirl fired her grappling hook and sprung up to the ceiling. She looked down on where Dr. Light stood. She pulled out several batarangs from her belt. She flung the weapons at the villain. "Now, Deku!" Batgirl called out as the batarangs flew through the air towards the villain. Dr. Light looked up. He held up his arms and crossed them in a defensive position. His gloves generated a light bubble shield around his body, blocking the incoming attacks. However, before he could do anything else, Deku came in and struck the shield with a kick. The shield shattered as Dr. Light was sent back. He dug his heels and stopped himself before firing at Deku with his gloves. Deku jumped out of the way of the blasts. "Deku, the diamonds must be in his chest and gloves," Batgirl instructed. "Got it," Deku replied, ducking under one of the light blasts. Deku stopped dodging the attacks. He focused on the targets that Batgirl had suggested for him. Deku focused the power of one for all with green lightning crackling around his body. He rushed his opponent. He used his greater speed to reach Dr. Light. He reeled back his right arm and punched the villain in the chest. "Detroit smash!" Deku called out, shattering the chest piece of Dr. Light. The chest plate of Dr. Light shattered into pieces as the diamond fell to the ground. "No, Doctor!" Light screamed. "That's not fair, you two can't gang up on me, that's cheating." "Sorry, pal," Batgirl called out. Dr. Light looked up and saw Batgirl jumping at him. He created a light shield to block the incoming superhero. Batgirl, however, jumped over the shield. She spun around, swiping the legs of the supervillain. Dr. Light fell down to the ground, hitting his head. Batgirl pulled off the face mask of Dr. Light, revealing the face of Arthur Light. She let out a sad sigh. She pulled out the recognition software result and she compared them. They were the same. "Life isn't a video game," Batgirl said. "Game over." Oswald tried to crawl away from the mess but was blocked by Deku's foot. He looked up only to see the superhero giving him a glare. We can work this out," Cobblepot tried. A short time later, the police took both Oswald and Dr. Light into custody. Oswald had just turned 18 and was found guilty of contraband and forgery of school supplies. His web of blackmail and corruption was discovered and untangled. Arthur was given a lighter sentence. It turned out that Arthur's school life had been destroyed by Cobblepot after he was used as a delivery boy for many of his schemes. Deku and Batgirl observed from a nearby rooftop with slight sadness. They had won, but an innocent kid had crossed a line. "Well, I guess we can't always win 100%. Batgirl muttered. "Yeah, but at least we brought some justice. Cobblepot will be put away for a long time. And Arthur will get the help he needs," Deku said. "You did a great job, Batgirl. I know. It's just, how many things did I miss because of some dumb video game? If I had been more in the real world, I would have caught on to Oswald's schemes earlier." Batgirl sighed. "We can't change what's happened, but we can make a better future. You remind me of that every day, Babs," Deku admitted, getting Batgirl's attention. "I once lost faith in becoming a hero, but you didn't let the lack of power stop you from doing the right thing. And that's something that I admire." Batgirl blushed at the words of her boyfriend. She smiled and kissed his cheek. Thanks, Izuku. You always know what to say, Batgirl said. So what do you want to do now? I don't know. I mean, it will be Friday soon and Deku began when Batgirl's eyes went wide. What? Friday? Batgirl asked. Oh my gosh, I forgot that I had to study for the makeup quiz. Galatea yawned as she opened her eyes. She stretched out of bed feeling like she had not slept very well. She scratched the back of her head before cracking her neck. Man, what a messy night. Hey sis, you slept fine? Galatea asked, rubbing her eyes. However, she didn't get a response. She looked to where Kara usually slept, only to find it empty. Not a single trace. What the? Galatea asked before looking at Izuku's bed. Hey Izuku, did Kara fall out of bed or something? But Izuku was also missing. Galatea started to get worried. Kara and her were usually the ones that always woke up late or Izuku would wake them up. She got up from bed and started looking for her roommates and friends. Izuku, Kara, where are you guys? Galatea called out. She didn't get a response. She started to feel like she was alone. She walked out of her room going down to search for her adoptive parents, hoping that they would tell her where her friends were. Hey mom, dad, are you guys down there? Galatea asked. But once again she didn't get a response. She walked down the stairs with the wood creaking under her feet. She turned to the kitchen only to find it as empty as her room. Galatea was starting to get worried, but she also noticed that the usually cheery house was looking pale and without any life. Something wasn't right. She had to get out of that house. She rushed to the door, not bothering to put on clothes. Galatea grabbed hold of the doorknob, but the handle shattered like glass under her touch. Galatea recoiled in shock. What the hell is going on? Galatea shrieked. The door busted open, allowing a blinding light to come into the house. Galatea covered her eyes as she screamed in fear. Galatea screamed, jumping out of the bed. Izuku and Kara were at her side. They grabbed hold of Galatea as she kicked and struggled against their grip. She was thrusting and jumping about with her powers going haywire. Izuku and Kara pulled her back down from the air to the bed. They ducked and dodged the thrashing that the second Kryptonian threw in a wild frenzy. Galatea, please calm down. Izuku begged as he was forced to use one for all to hold her. Calm down, it was a nightmare, Kara added, blocking an elbow to the face. Galatea's eyes snapped open at the screaming. She shifted her eyes left and right, looking at her two roommates. She had a cold sweat that clung to her skin like a deep dive into a pool of ice-cold water. She took in deep breath after deep breath as she calmed herself. Galatea panted as she grabbed hold of both Izuku and Kara. Oh my god, Galatea panted. What? What happened? You were having a nightmare? Izuku responded. You started screaming and woke us up. Yeah, what nightmare were you having? Kara asked. You woke me up and I'm a heavy sleeper. What was the nightmare about? Izuku asked as Galatea brushed her hair back. Galatea looked at Izuku's kind eyes with a sigh of relief. She hugged him in a back-breaking embrace as she took in a deep breath. Deku winced a bit but hugged her back. He rubbed her back, calming her down. Galatea loved that feeling. She wanted Izuku to grab hold of her and keep her in a safe embrace. Galatea, are you alright? Izuku asked. I don't know, Galatea sniffed. It's all a blur. Oh yeah, just ignore me. Pretend I'm not here. Kara muttered as Galatea hugged Izuku, feeling a bit jealous of her twin's position. The next morning, Galatea looked like she hadn't slept all week. She had bags under her eyes that looked like they could carry the groceries. Her hair was wild and messy, and she seemed unresponsive for the most part. She just stared at her food with little interest. She let out a sigh. Izuku and Kara looked at Galatea with worried looks. Galatea, are you feeling all right? Izuku asked. You haven't even touched your food yet. I'm just yawn tired, Galatea replied. Yeah, no kidding. Come on sis, what's been eating you up? Kara asked. You can tell us. Galatea wasn't sure if she should say anything. She didn't even understand what was going on with her. She didn't want to appear weak or like she needed someone to save her. Galatea was going to have to put a brave face and toughen it up until she realized what was going on with her messed up dreams. If only she could remember what they were about. I mean, I'd definitely toughen it out. Don't want to appear like a little girl, you know, Kara said. So I won't bother you for doing that. Galatea stopped herself. Toughening it out was exactly what Galatea wanted to do. She then began to think about what she should do, but all the things that came to mind were things that Kara would do. It's all right, T. You can tell us when you're ready, Izuku said, placing his hand on Galatea's, comforting her. Galatea blushed at his action. He always had a way of making her feel like she was safe. I don't know. I don't remember what those dreams are about, or what's causing them, Galatea admitted. Don't worry, Galatea, we'll help you find out why this is happening, Izuku said with a big smile, and we'll help fix it. You know what I think it is? Kara asked, getting back in the conversation. Izuku and Galatea turned to face the blonde Kryptonian with curiosity. Sex. You need sex, a lot of it. We all need some sex, Kara said, causing Izuku and Galatea to blush at the idea. Kara, I don't think this is the best time for jokes. Izuku replied. Nah, I'm serious, we're all thinking about it. We could use some sex to unwind it and release much-needed stress, Kara argued. In 3 days the punishment will be over and we will be able to have a big makeup party. You'll be better after that, T. Izuku and Galatea blushed. They wanted to retort, but they both knew that the feeling of repression was a strong one. All the girls were a little bit pent up and Izuku was feeling a bit angsty for the lack of action. It was no secret that part of Izuku's punishment was for him to refrain from any form of sexual activity, and some of the girls used this chance to tempt him, which was something Kara and Galatea did when they were alone with the green-haired hero. But of course T wouldn't give her twin the satisfaction of getting the better of her. I'm sure that we can wait a little bit for that, but if you don't mind me going first, I'll gladly take Greenie for a spin later then, Galatea replied with a sneaky smile. Oh heck no, Kara snapped with a blush painted across her face. What I mean to say is, you'll have to keep it together, since Diana has first dibs. Lucky her. She muttered the last part. Izuku felt a drop of sweat run down the back of his head at the blonde bombshell. He loved all the girls equally, but he could still feel like he had to put things in order or things could get messy. He often wondered how much easier his life would be if he only agreed to date only one of them, but he didn't regret falling in love with all of them. Galatea smiled like a cat while Izuku had his little moment of reflection. She loved being able to pull one over Kara, but there were times when she thought that they were too similar. It didn't help her that some people at school often confused them. She let out a sigh and got up from the table. I'm gonna go get a shower, Galatea said. You can join me if you want, Greenie. Izuku blushed again as the second blonde bombshell walked away, swaying her hips side to side. He groaned as he felt a pit appear in his stomach. He'd been getting those ever since his punishment began. After getting a shower, Galatea had taken Izuku on a walk around the city. She had thought that a walk around would help her relax a bit. She felt all right for the most part, unbothered by the things of the outside world. Are you feeling any better, Galatea? Izuku asked. Yeah, I think I feel better, Izuku. You're a great mood lifter, Galatea said, hugging Izuku with her one arm. You're better than a rabbit's foot. Isn't that meant for luck? Izuku asked while blushing. But you're welcome, T. I'll help you all as much as I can if I can. You only need to ask. Galatea smiled at his strong, happy face with his best heroic expression. That face always made her happy, not only because he looked adorable, but there were enough looks of an action hero to make him a great role model. She loved that about him and in a way made her want to be closer to him as much as she could. Thanks, Izuku. Guess I don't need to worry with you around, Galatea said, kissing Izuku's cheek. Galatea let out a yawn before rubbing her eye. All the energy that she had was suddenly drained from her. She slumped on top of Izuku, forcing him to grab hold of her with his free arms. He looked up at her and was surprised that she was so quick to get tired. Hey, you mind if I take a nap in the park? Galatea asked. Yeah, sure, Galatea, Izuku said as he helped carry her to the nearby bench. How are you feeling? He asked, looking at her face for any signs of sickness. I'm just yawn, Galatea replied, covering her mouth with her hand. I think I'm hungry or have low blood sugar. Galatea fell asleep on top of Izuku, nearly falling off from the bench. Izuku caught her before she slumped out of the bench and into the ground. He grabbed hold of her as he laid her against the bench. He looked and examined her for any signs of what might have happened to her. Izuku knew just how sturdy Kryptonians usually were, which made this situation all the more worrying for him. He didn't know what was going on with her. There were no signs of kryptonite and the sun was shining bright on top of them. He then pulled out his phone, knowing that he was now down to the only other thing that could hurt a Kryptonian: magic. Izuku placed the phone against his ear as it began to ring. Come on, come on, come on, Izuku muttered to himself. Pick up, Z. As Izuku waited for his magical friend and ally, his mind drifted into the source of the ailment of Galatea. They didn't have that many magical enemies, if any. The closest one he could think of was Barbie with the cheetah curse, but she was now arguably on their side and was more of a frontal assault. He drew a blank on who could be the one responsible, and there was no reason for any of them to attack Galatea and not the entire team. Izuku was frustrated that he couldn't come up with a clear answer. Just then the call was answered. Hello, darling, Z answered. To what do I owe the pleasure of your call? Z. Galatea just passed out in the middle of the park, and I can't tell why. I need your help quickly, Izuku said without taking a moment to breathe. I don't know what's wrong with her, but I think this is magic-based. What? I'll be right there, Z replied. I'll get Kara and be on my way. Do not let her out of your sight. Z hung up the call. Izuku put away his phone as he kept his eyes on Galatea. He was feeling a little better knowing that Z was on her way with Kara, but he still felt unease with what was going on with Galatea. Galatea's eyes snapped open. She found herself alone in the park. Everything was black and white and only a single light shined over her head. She looked around, hoping to find any signs of Izuku or just about anyone for that matter. Izuku, where are you? Galatea called out. She got up from the bench and started looking for any signs of her friend. She walked down the streets, but she didn't see anyone. The roads had cars on them, but they weren't moving like they should have. There were no people in the streets. It was as though everyone had vanished from the city. Galatea used her super hearing to see if there was anyone around, but she couldn't hear anything. No birds, no cars, no dogs, no people, no sounds of any kind. Hello, is anyone out there? Galatea called out. There was no response. What is wrong with these stupid dreams? Galatea screamed in frustration. Why do I keep having them? Because your nightmares are just too sweet to pass up. Galatea turned around at the sound of that mocking voice. She looked all over the street but didn't find anyone else. She lifted up her arms, keeping up her guard against whoever might be making fun of her from the shadows. "Oh, aren't you cute, being all jumpy in your own nightmare?" the voice called out to her. Galatea growled. The voice was like a nail drawing on a whiteboard, accompanied by a mocking laugh. She thought that a hyena was smiling behind her with a giggle caught between its jagged teeth. "All right, pal, you want to mess with me? Then come on out and face me like a man," Galatea challenged. "Why would I do that?" the voice joked from behind Galatea. She turned around and saw what was tormenting her dreams. The creature looked like a small gremlin with long pointy ears, jagged teeth, and a dark look in its eyes. It looked like one of those imps you'd see in cartoons and movies with gray skin and a grin fit for a hyena. "Who the heck are you?" Galatea asked. "I've never seen you in my life." "Oh, you don't need to know me to have a nightmare," the imp replied, giggling like a little monster. "I am a nightmare goblin," Z explained. "These creatures are the bottom feeders of the magical world. They target people with lots of tendencies for fear and nightmares and feed on their life force to keep themselves on the up and up." Z and Kara had taken Izuku and Galatea back to Z's apartments. Galatea was laying on a table with candles lit around her. She was grunting and turning in her sleep, clearly having a nightmare of her own. "How do we get rid of it?" Izuku asked. "And please tell me the answer means beating up that little twerp," Kara added, punching her palm. "No one messes with my sister and gets away with it. The only way to get rid of this goblin is to beat it within the dream of the victim," Z explained. "Sadly, the mind of the victim can close itself from anyone that they don't trust, so only someone that they trust can go into this kind of dream. Are you ready for this, darling?" "Are you sure it'll work?" Izuku asked. "Of course, we all trust you, Galatea, more now that I think about it," Kara said, playfully punching Izuku's shoulder. "Just save me a little of that little gremlin for later." Izuku gave Kara a confident smile and a thumbs up. "I will, Kara," Izuku replied. "All right, time is of the essence and we need to make the spell quickly," Z said as her hero suit appeared on her body. "You'll need to go into the dream and get the goblin out of Galatea's dream and make her confront her own nightmare. You ready?" Izuku nodded. He would not let his friends down. "Just tell me what to do," Izuku asked. "All right, close your eyes. You must think of Galatea and the bond that you both share," Zatanna explained as an orb of purple light appeared between her hands. Izuku did as Zatanna instructed. "Peel's DNA retina se talag murd," Zatanna said as the orb of light turned into a rod in her hands. "Also, please forgive me, darling." But before Izuku could question Zatanna's words, she swung. Zatanna struck Izuku in the head with the rod of purple magic. Izuku was instantly knocked out and fell on top of Galatea's body, with his head landing directly on her breasts. "Wow," Kara said in utter surprise. "I thought you'd just say some hocus pocus and make him fall asleep, not bash him over the head with a magic rod." "Yes, it is one of the least elegant ways of entering someone's dreams, but it is the quickest," Zatanna explained. "I hope that they're okay though. What's the worst that could happen? The nightmare turns into a wet dream or something?" Kara joked, making light of the situation. "I don't know if that's ever happened before, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did," Zatanna muttered. Izuku drifted deep into his own sleep. He opened his eyes and found himself falling to the ground of a black and white city. He screamed and flapped his arms as the ground drew closer to him. He landed with a heavy thud. His body was sore, but there was a ringing in his head. Izuku reached for his head and felt a sting. "Ow, what did Z do to me?" Izuku asked, rubbing his head in pain. Izuku looked around at the colorless empty city with worry. He didn't see any signs of Galatea nearby, so he had to go look for her and be careful with the nightmare goblin. Every single one of his steps echoed on the empty streets. He looked side to side for any signs of Galatea or whatever might be the fear that was tormenting her. "Galatea, where are you?" Izuku called out as he ran down the street. Izuku took a sharp turn on the street as he kept calling for his friend. The more he ran around the area, the more he feared for the safety of his friend. Just then Izuku heard a loud scream coming from the other side of the block. He turned his whole body around and activated One for All out of instinct. "Galatea!" Izuku screamed as he rushed past the cars and jumped over the lampposts. Izuku jumped from wall to wall, wondering what that nightmare goblin was making Galatea go through. He jumped out of the alley and spotted Galatea on her knees, covering her head with her hands. He made a swift turn in the air, landing with his feet before going to Galatea's side. "Galatea, are you all right?" Izuku asked, getting her attention. Galatea looked up with a scared expression on her face. "Izuku?" Galatea asked. "Are you really here?" she asked, touching his face and body to make sure of what she was seeing. "Yeah, I'm here," Izuku said. "No need to fear because I am here." Izuku flashed his iconic heroic smile, bringing a smile to Galatea's face. "It's really you," Galatea exclaimed, hugging Izuku with a bone-crushing hug that one would reserve for their one true love. "I am so glad that you're here." Izuku struggled to speak through the strength of the hug. He could feel almost everything in his body being crushed. He felt like an old tube of toothpaste that someone was trying to pop out the last bit of paste from. Only for Izuku, his bones and inside organs were the paste. He felt all the blood circulation being cut by the hug and some of his bones being turned to flour for bread. I can't breathe," Izuku grunted. Galatea's eyes shot open as a red blush appeared on her face. She released Izuku from her hug, allowing her lover to breathe a little. "Sorry, I got a little overexcited." Galatea admitted, blushing like a tomato. What are you doing here? I came here to wake you. Oop, Izuku replied between deep breaths. Who dares disturb my fun? The nightmare goblin snapped, popping back into view. Izuku and Galatea turned to face the little gremlin with a glare. The two young heroes glared at the little monster as they tightened their fists. Your days of tormenting my friend are over, you little monster, Izuku demanded as the green lightning of One for All crackled all around his body. Oh, the dreamy knight in shaggy green armor is here to save the fair maiden from the big mean old nightmare goblin. The goblin mocked before laughing like a hyena. Don't make me laugh, broccoli head. You've got no power here. The nightmare goblin jumped in the air before curling up into a ball and vanishing. Izuku and Galatea felt the ground tremble under their feet. They looked down and to their shock, the ground was crumbling under their feet. We got to move, Izuku said, picking up Galatea in his arms. Izuku used One for All to strengthen his body. He jumped away from the crumbling ground just as a massive hole opened up where they stood. He jumped away from the crumbling shaking of the ground. Every time he landed, the ground under his feet began to crumble like a brittle piece of loose gravel. He kept going faster and faster, trying to keep ahead of the crumbling ground. But whenever he touched ground, it crumbled down. Damn it, we can't keep running away, Izuku cursed. How does he do this? This is only the beginning, kid, the nightmare goblin called out from his hiding spot. Suddenly, big black clouds gathered up in the sky. Thunder and lightning echoed through the empty city. But instead of rain or lightning falling down on the heroes, cockroaches began to fall on the heroes. Izuku and Galatea screamed in utter terror and disgust at the falling insects. As Izuku was about to land on the roof of a building, a hole appeared under his feet. Izuku and Galatea fell through the hole, but they didn't land on the inside of the building. The two heroes fell through a slipping slide with no control of where they would go or how they could stop themselves. They screamed in fear of whatever the little gremlin had stored for them. What is he trying to do? Izuku asked. Scare the heck out of us to live longer, Galatea replied. I really hate him. The two teens tried to use their feet to slow themselves, but the surface was so smooth that they couldn't get a very good footing to slow down. They spotted a light at the end of the slide and it was coming up to them fast. Hang on, Izuku said, reaching out for Galatea. Galatea reached out to grab his hand, but they were met with a flip. The two young heroes were sent flying and into the light at the end of the tunnel. They flew through the air before landing on a hard surface floor. They tried to pull themselves up, but the ground itself pushed them back up. Okay, where is that little twerp? Galatea asked, being more than 100% done with being toyed with by the little goblin. Oh, acting the tough girl must be something that runs in the family. One would say that you and your sister are one and the same. The nightmare goblin laughed. Oh wait, you are. You are nothing more than the dark reflection of your sister. But there is one thing you are different about. Shut your mouth, Galatea snapped. Oh right, you don't want your boy toy to figure you out. The nightmare goblin mocked from the shadows. The nightmare goblin appeared in a puff of smoke before the two heroes like a mocking pest. Galatea jumped up, reeling back her fist. She was ready to turn the little monster into a pile of mush. But when she let out her punch, she was met with a white shining screen. Galatea was sucked into the bright screen. She was blinded by the bright light. She opened her eyes and to her shock she found herself being stuck inside a mirror. She tried to scream but no words came out. She struck the glass in front of her but it didn't budge. She felt the walls closing in on her. The world was becoming smaller for her. Galatea couldn't see anyone on the side of the glass that she was on. She hated it. She didn't want to be a reflection of someone else. Galatea continued punching the glass as the mirror window as tears swelled up at her eyes. Izuku watched in horror at what was happening before him as the nightmare goblin laughed. Galatea, Izuku called out before glaring at the nightmare goblin. What did you do to her? The nightmare goblin laughed as he watched Galatea struggle to get out of her reflective prison. He turned around to face Izuku. He sported his signature hyena laugh and a smile with his row of sharp teeth. He was loving all that he was doing, and he wasn't going to stop if he could help it. Oh, not much. I'm just putting on the show of what she's most afraid of, the nightmare goblin said, gesturing to the glass prison Galatea was trapped in. She fears that she is nothing more than a reflection of someone else, a copy, a knockoff of another. Sure, she has all the memories and emotions of the Prime One, but she doesn't have any reason as to where they come from. And to have that kind of fear is such a rare delicacy. Izuku gritted his teeth in rage. His blood boiled as he glared at the little monster. His fists balled so much that his nails dug into his skin and his knuckles turned white. He wanted nothing more than to kick the little monster out of T's mind and then kick him some more. Izuku was blinded by rage and snapped, "Black Whip!" Izuku fired his quirk from his hand, wrapping the nightmare goblin. Izuku pulled back the whip, dragging the little monster along with it. One for all 15%. Detroit Smash. Izuku called out as his fist connected with the face of the little gremlin. The nightmare goblin was sent flying with a fist imprint on his face. However, Izuku wasn't done. He chased after the little monster with lightning crackling around his body. He zoomed past the goblin, stopping in front of him. Izuku lifted his leg high up in the air. Shoot style. St. Louis Smash, Izuku called out, bringing down his axe kick right on the face of the nightmare goblin. The little monster was sent bouncing around the room like a pinball, breaking the floor with every bounce. Izuku used his speed to catch up with the little monster before punching the gremlin. He had never been so angry in his life, but somehow it felt liberating to unleash the rage on someone that deserved it. The nightmare goblin kept bouncing and receiving punch after kick from Izuku. He tried to create something horrific to send Izuku back, but the attacks weren't giving him a second to think. The little gremlin was afraid of where this would inevitably end up for him. Izuku spun around, delivering a roundhouse kick on the gremlin's stomach. The nightmare goblin screamed in pain as he was sent all the way into a wall. He crashed against the wall, making a small hole in the shape of his body. Ow! Some people can't take a joke, eh? The nightmare goblin groaned before falling to the floor in pain. The little gremlin looked up just in time to see Izuku charging at him with his fist reeled back to finish him off. He panicked. However, that moment of fear cleared his mind enough to come up with an idea. He slammed his hands together, causing hands to spring up from the ground. The hands caught Izuku, pinning him to the ground, making it impossible for him to move. "You really are starting to bug me, kid. Time for some payback," the nightmare goblin said. "Let's see what you are afraid of." The nightmare goblin reached into Izuku's mind. But he didn't just go into his young mind. The nightmare goblin reached into the deepest fear of one for all. The figure of a man wearing a black suit appeared from the floor. His face was obscured, but a dark aura of malice crackled around him. Even though his eyes were obscured, a glare like that of a wolf gazed down to Izuku through the darkness. "Is this the best they could have come up with?" the figure asked with a disappointed tone. "I expected more from you, All Might." Izuku's eyes widened in fear. That smooth voice filled him with terror. It was as if he had been talking with the Grim Reaper. Thoughts of how a fight with this force of evil and malicious intent played in front of his eyes on loop. It would not end well for him or his friends. Izuku found himself paralyzed by fear. The nightmare goblin began to laugh and jump with joy. "Big bad hero is afraid of this guy. Not so tough now, are ya?" The nightmare goblin cackled to himself. "This fear is so delicious, I'll be able to eat off you for ages." However, the little goblin had forgotten about Galatea. She watched in both amazement and fear at the sight before her. A great anger burned within her. She was so furious at being afraid of some insecurity and how she made her feel hopeless. She reeled back her fist and began pounding the glass in front of her. She punched it over and over again. Her fist began to bleed, staining the glass wall in front of her. But she didn't relent. Galatea punched the wall with all she had, letting out a battle cry. The glass shattered. The nightmare goblin froze as he heard the glass hitting the floor. He turned around to find a very angry Kryptonian woman with a bloody fist. The little monster that had been feeding on Galatea's nightmares felt every single one of his non-existing hairs standing on end. "Listen here, you little freak. I just figured out that there is something I fear more than my little identity crisis," Galatea growled before appearing in front of the goblin. The nightmare goblin tried to create another nightmare for Galatea, but the angry Kryptonian grabbed him by the throat. "Losing the people that I care about to a lame emotional vampire?" Galatea snapped. She pulled back her bloodied fist before punching the nightmare goblin so hard that he was sent flying out of her dream. Galatea and Izuku woke up from their deep dream with a loud gasp. They took in several deep breaths before they realized that they were in a very compromising position. They jumped off of each other, falling to the floor. They took a minute to get their blushes under control before talking to each other. "Galatea, are you all right?" Izuku asked. "I should be asking you that," Galatea said, hugging Izuku in her arms. "I don't know what that little monster showed you, but you've got nothing to fear." Ahem. The two heroes looked back and spotted Kara and Z holding the nightmare goblin inside a sealed glass bottle. "We're so sorry to interrupt, but I thought you two would be happy to see that this little monster won't be bothering anyone ever again," Z said, shaking the glass bottle. "Oh yeah, definitely," Galatea said as both her and Izuku got back to their feet. After Z locked away the nightmare goblin, Izuku, Kara, and Galatea flew back to their home. They were too tired to even have dinner, and as such an early bedtime was in order. However, Galatea pulled Izuku to the side to talk to what they had just gone through. "So, how are you feeling?" Galatea asked. "Shaken. I never thought I'd see him not so soon anyway." Izuku sighed. "Who was that guy anyway?" Galatea asked. "Someone All Might warned me about. I don't know everything about him, but I'll tell you and the others about him soon. I promise," Izuku said. "You should really cut back on the macho tough act, Izuku," Galatea said, giving him a kiss on the cheek. "It doesn't suit you." Izuku smiled. "You've been calling me by my name lately. What's all that about?" Izuku asked. "Well, you know all that little gremlin said. I was afraid that I didn't have my own identity," Galatea admitted. "Well, that's okay. You don't need to completely change because you don't know who you are. You are Galatea and you shouldn't have to change unless you want to," Izuku said, giving a reassuring smile. Galatea felt her heart skip a beat. She wanted to go crazy with Izuku at that moment, but she could wait a day. She instead kissed him on the lips as a thank you. And guys, this is the end. I hope you guys enjoyed well. Until next time, peace.